What is up, guys? This is Tcg Sam here, and in today's video I'm coming at you guys with a guide on the new ogdoadic reptile archetype that recently came out in Ancient Guardians. But before we begin, I just want to ask you guys to please remember, if you haven't already, be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, because it really helps get me motivated to keep posting more videos like this, and it really helps the channel out. So with that being said, let's just hop straight into it. So just before I begin on like the plays and stuff, just to briefly explain the deck, most of the reptiles do things in the graveyard. Some of them contribute monsters from the field to summon themselves back. And then the level 4 guys like Nunu or Naoya, which I'll show later on, can discard themselves to send the other attribute to the graveyard. So essentially what they do is they fill up on the graveyard, and then all of them have good, decent graveyard effects that allow them to pretty much recur themselves or get you more resources in one way or another. But I think it's better understood if I just show you some of the plays the deck can do. So starting off, just the single card Nunu plus like any discard fodder. This can be any single card that in your deck. It doesn't matter what it is. So like even if you draw a quote-unquote Garnet, you can just discard it instead. It makes no difference. But with that being said, let's just hop straight into the combos. So starting off with Nunu, it's going to allow us to discard it and send a dark reptile monster from our deck to the graveyard. And the monster we're going to be sending is actually Zoha. Zoha is a level 4. The only relevant effect in this case, if it's in the graveyard, then you can send one card from your hand to the graveyard and add it to your hand. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to discard our discard fodder, adding back our Zoha. Effect the Nunu in the graveyard, since we have no monsters, we can summon it out, special summon itself out, normal summon our Zoha, overlay our Zoha and our Nunu. It's important to remember that Nunu locks us into reptiles while it's on the board, so the only thing we can really make is King of the Feral Imps. King of the Feral Imps, you can detach anyone, it doesn't matter, you're searching, but this time you're going to be searching for a copy of like the dark counterpart of Nunu, and that's going to be Naoya. So Naoya's effect essentially is the same as Nunu. It sends a light reptile, and when it's normal or special, you add one ogdoadic spell or trap from your deck to your hand. But for now, we're concerned with the effect to send from hand. We're going to be sending Curse, the ogdoadic light, and this is like one of the quote-unquote Garnets in this combo, but it literally doesn't matter if we drew it, because we can just discard it off of a Zoha to get into the graveyard anyways. Effect of Curse. Curse effect is going to allow us to tribute one monster from our field and special summon it, and then special summon one ogdoadic monster from our graveyard. So we're going to tribute our King of the Feral Imps, special summon out Curse. Curse effect is going to special summon out Naoya. Naoya effect is when it's normal or special, you add one ogdoadic spell or trap. And the one that you're going to be going for is ogdoadic Water Lily. And then from here, what I thought was the most efficient use of the resources was the Link off Curse. Now it gets banished because of Curse, but we're going to turn that into a copy of our Verte Anaconda. And then from here, we're going to activate ogdoadic Water Lily, which allows us to send one reptile monster from our deck to the graveyard, so it's an in-theme Foolish Burial. And if we have 5 or more reptiles with different names, we can actually special summon reptile back. And since we actually have 4 in the graveyard right now, when we send one, we'll have 5 at the resolution of this, and then we can summon back whatever we send. So the card we're going to be sending, you can either send a copy of OGDOADICS, the Ogdoadic Overlord. I'm just put them out so you guys can see what they do, or you can go for Aran, the Ogdoadic King. So pretty much what Ogdoadic Overlord does is once it's on the field, as a quick effect, you can send all monsters from the field to your graveyard except face-up monster special summon from the graveyard, which is not really that relevant, I guess. It sends everything, but itself is the most important part. Aran, the Ogdoadic King, is another sort of pseudo disruption where if your opponent adds a card, you send one random card from their hand to the graveyard. As well, if an opponent's monster is sent to the graveyard, you add one light or dark reptile monster from your deck to your graveyard to your hand. So it's kind of like a pseudo follow-up in that. So depending on whichever one you think is better for this situation, you just send that one to the graveyard. Let's say 9 times out of 10, I think OGDOADICS is better if you don't know what you're playing against. So let's send OGDOADICS to the graveyard. And since we have 5 reptile monsters, remember King of the Feral Imps is a reptile, and they're all different names. We get special summon back our OGDOADICS, and of course, now we just activate Verte Anaconda. Looks like I forgot to put the Dragoon package in here, but in theory, you are supposed to send the Red Eyes package and summon out the Dragoon. And this way, you have an Ogdoadic Overlord, which pretty much is a board wipe. It sends all face monsters on the field except monsters summoned from the graveyard, but 9 times out of 10, like your opponent's not going to be able to put any of those on the board. We have a Dragoon negate as well, and if this all like survives, we don't have to use Ogdoadic, then we still have a Dragoon, and this is probably just game next turn, considering that our Nunu, as long as we control as long as we control an Ogdoadic monster, we can summon itself back, and that's free tribute fodder for a Curse, which then can summon itself back and special summon one ogdoadic monster from the graveyard again, and then we can just keep going on from there. So that's like one of the most simple combos of the deck, and this is what I figured out you could do with like a single Nunu. I know nothing game breaking, but this just shows like some of the potential power of this deck. But that's gonna lead me, unfortunately, to some of the downsides of this deck. I'm gonna add all the ogdoadic monsters to my hand, and we're gonna just discuss each one like alone. So the biggest problem I noticed with the ogdoadic monsters is that a lot of them just don't do anything by themselves other than Nunu or Naoya. Like the rest of them, they need other cards with it for them to actually be able to do anything, pretty much. And like, to be honest, a lot of them are just honestly bricks in the hand. So you can see all the ogdoadic targets we're playing, even though we're only playing one of like the big guys. So like big being not the level 4s, because the level 4s, Nunu and Naoya are actually pretty damn good. But like, if you look at a card like Aliert or look at a card like Curse, while their effects can be really, really good, the problem is you need a lot of setup. You need them in the graveyard, first of all, and second of all, you need monsters on the field. But what happens if you don't open a card like Naoya or Nunu, or especially if you don't open Nunu? Like, a lot of these cards just become bricks because, like, well, they're just high-level monsters that don't do anything in your hand. You need some way to get them to the graveyard, and you can't always rely on a card like Snake Rain, since it's an unsearchable spell card. Like, while Snake Rain, yeah, it's a super, super powerful card, you can't really rely on it because obviously it's not searchable. Ogdoadic Water Lily, like even Ogdoadic Water Lily, it's a foolish burial, but it doesn't do anything on its own. Like you have to have other cards on the field for it to actually be able to do anything. For example, like if you just have Ogdoadic Water Lily, it's not really a starter, because if you send something, it just doesn't really do anything unless you have other cards with it. Which pretty much is like the biggest weakness of this deck, is that it heavily relies on having like a lot of good setups, or drawing like your Nunu. Your Nunu obviously is the best card to set up everything, and you definitely want to play 3 of it. But the problem is if you don't open Nunu, a lot of the other stuff becomes kind of like problematic. Naoya is a somewhat decent starter because you can Naoya send itself, dump Curse, normal summon any monster, tribute it for Curse, bring back Naoya, search Ogdoadic Water Lily, and at least you have 2 monsters on the board for Verte Anaconda. But like aside from that, without Nunu or combinations of cards together, the deck just doesn't really do anything. It can put its strengths are like putting out a lot of bodies on the board, but the problem is like the bodies themselves, unless they're specifically like the King or the Overlord, they don't really do anything to disrupt your opponent. And to even get those bodies on board, of course, like I said many times before, you need to have setup. So that's pretty much the biggest downside of the deck that I want to cover in this guide. I know it's like super unfortunate, because I felt like this archetype had a lot of potential. I'm not saying it's bad, but there's another downside of the deck that I haven't even mentioned, is the other effect, like the downsides of the ogdoadic monsters. Most of them pretty much have the effect where once you trigger their effect, your opponent gets to do something. So like in the case of Aliert, if it's special summoned, your opponent gets to add 1 monster from their graveyard to their hand, which can be kind of huge. Same thing with a card like Curse. Assuming you're not going first, of course, your opponent gets to special summon 1 monster back from the graveyard, which can be problematic. Although these effects won't like always come to bite you in the butt, but it's like, honestly, the fact that they have these restrictions or these downsides kind of make them a lot worse than I feel like they had to be. If they didn't have the restrictions that your opponent would get like pluses, like even then I still think the deck would have its fair share of problems, that being of course its consistency issues. But like other than that, I would say it's a very, very decent engine to splash into some other decks. I know there have been like decks floating out there like Orcus. So like Orcus works particularly well with this deck because discard fodders that it offers free bodies on the board for your Orcus Nightmare to use, and of course you can make a Dragoon in the deck as well, which is super, super good. There's an Invoked build running around, which can put up like Mechaba, like Hyperiton, the level rank 9 XYZ, and like put up like OGDOADICS or something. So like can put up a lot of interruptions, and if you combine it with engines that are sort of consistent in themselves, like where you don't necessarily have to rely on a lot of cards to make your plays. So a card like obviously like Alistair the Invoker, that's the only card you need to make your plays. So the rest of your hand can be all ogdoadic monsters, and you can make your plays from there. Or a card like, or a deck like Orcus, where there's a lot of discard fodder. You can discard the Orcus in the graveyard, and then pretty much any like normal summon becomes like Orcus combo, which is pretty decent as well. But like, yeah, aside from that, there haven't been too many other ogdoadic builds that I've seen that have been too successful. Perhaps there's a Lair of Darkness one, because like obviously the tribute cost can be alleviated if you have Lair of Darkness. You tribute one of your opponent's monsters, which can be really, really good actually. But of course, then again, that does pose some consistency issues because Lair of Darkness itself isn't super consistent. And to even get these guys in the graveyard, you need quite a bit of setup. So yeah, that's gonna do it for my quick discussion of the ogdoadic archetype. So this is like probably not even scratching the surface of what this deck can do. I'm not saying this deck is bad by any means, but like I just want to highlight a few of its strengths. Obviously, that being puts a lot of bodies on board really easily. It has a good follow up because all the monsters do things in the graveyard, and has some really decent cards like. Overlord just can wipe a board entirely. Aran can act as a follow-up and as a disruption. And of course, the level 4s are really good starters. And Water Lily itself, like Foolish Burial and Monster Reborn in one card, seems pretty good to me. And of course, they have access to a card like Snake Rain, which is just one of the most like powerful cards in this archetype. This deck, probably the first deck to ever break Snake Rain. It is definitely really good. But unfortunately, the biggest downside I found is its consistency and yeah, it's just you just play a lot of bricks. A lot of the big ogdoadics are bricks without discard outlets. So if you don't open like Snake Rain, you don't open Water Lily or the small guys, then like it becomes a problem because these guys don't do anything in your hand, and you need other ways to discard them into the graveyard. And the other con of it is that I feel like as a pure deck, it can't really do too much. It definitely needs to be mixed with some like powerful cards. Like there's a Chaos build running around, Invoked, or of course Orcus. But yeah, those are just some of my thoughts on the deck. I know I haven't covered everything, so let me know if you guys thought I missed anything. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you found it insightful or useful, do let me know in the comments below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video once again. And with that, I will see you guys soon. Take care.